We are live.
Good afternoon and good morning for some folks on the West Coast, and hello and welcome to our ISE Fireside webinar, Tapping the Hidden Value in Microsoft 365 or Secure External File Sharing. We are just thrilled to have all of you here with us this afternoon. We've got a great program planned for all of you, but before we get started, I want to go ahead and sort of kick off our agenda and some housekeeping things. So we are very grateful to eShare for being our sponsor today, so thank you very much. We're going to hit some panelist introductions and have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll hear a little bit more from our sponsor, eShare. And then we'll jump into our panel discussion, as well as take questions from the audience. So there is a Q&A feature in Zoom, and we encourage all of you to ask your questions as you're thinking about them, and we'll be answering them towards the end of the show. And then we'll sign off at about 2:45. A couple of just things to make note of. We again appreciate all of you joining us, and we know that CPEs are very important to you. So if you are in need of one, you will earn 1 credit today. Just let us know when the survey pops up in your window, and tell us if you need that credit, and give us your CPE number, and we'll send you the information to make that deposit into your account. So you will have to complete the entire session today in order to get that CPE credit, and tell us that you need that information. So go ahead and let's get started with our panelist introductions. I'm very excited to have Prentice Brooks here today. And Prentice, would you say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Prentice Brooks. I've been in technology and information security for the last 15, 20 years in various aspects of security operations. Most recently, prior to Lincare, I was with Royal Caribbean until the cruise industry took a hit this year. So a little shift there, but otherwise, been working with this and dealing with the topic at hand for about the last 10 years or so.
Well, awesome, Prentice. It sounds like we asked the right person to join us today. And let's hear from James Beeson. It's been a while, James. Nice to see you.
Good to see you, Marcy. Thanks for the invitation, opportunity to talk about the interesting topic we've got today. I'm James Beeson. I'm the global CISO for Cigna. I've been there about 3.5 years. I've been spent the previous 20 years to that at GE as a part of the financial arm of GE called GE Capital. I've spent about 20 of those years in the information security space. And then before that, about another 10 years in various technology roles. So looking forward to the conversation this afternoon. Thanks.
Well, thank you, and thanks for joining us. And Nick Stamos, good to see you today. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for hosting this for us and supporting it. So my name is Nick Stamos. I'm the co-founder and CEO of eShare. eShare has been around for about 9 years now. It's my 4th startup that I've done. eShare was really focused on having the ability to enable external sharing for enterprises, and especially enterprises that have embraced the cloud with things like Office 365 and Teams and OneDrive and SharePoint Online or Google or G Suite or so on and so forth, and have discovered that sort of the challenge of sharing externally is really a different business problem than the challenge of sharing internally. And the native capabilities of all of these cloud providers are amazing and great, wonderful when it comes to sort of inside an organization, but they typically fall short when it comes to sharing outside. And eShare doesn't try to provide a product independent of those platforms, but really a product that complements those platforms and works with the same data set, the same environment, the same mail systems, really is an extension to that platform. And that's kind of one of our unique differentiated offerings here, is that we really try to make O365 better, we try to make G Suite better, and really let you leverage more under the investment that you've already made as an enterprise.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you, eShare, for being our sponsor today. Gentlemen, you ready to kick off our discussions? All right. Well, our first topic is your journey to the cloud. I know that many of us out there have various points in where we are in the cloud. And whether it's for email and office productivity, file storage, and team collaboration. And team collaboration right now has become very, very important for all of us, with all of us using different kinds of virtual platforms to stay connected, like ourselves today. But we're all not in the same point in our journey. And as you guys know, cloud adoption in different organizations can operate a lot on hybrid environments, and some are in cloud and some are on-prem, and some pre-pandemic have had to go, up to adopt some new cloud tools and software without having much time to really fully assess everything and its full capabilities and integration into the architecture. So, it's been a bit of a journey since we've been in the post-pandemic world here as it relates to our journey, our various journeys into the cloud and our ability to collaborate. James, I'd love to talk to you. I always have admired Cigna sort of being ahead of the curve on everything in technology. Can you tell us a little bit about your stage and where your organization might be in their journey to the cloud, and what's been really maybe the hardest part of your migration there and deployment, and just tell us what's kind of been going on.
Sure. We're well along the way on our journey, but we still have a long ways to go. It's kind of how I would frame it up. Overall, no question. It's very clear to us that given the kind of the global nature and complexity of the business that we're in, we're going to be in a multi-cloud, multi-hybrid environment. That's the best way I have to describe it. I mean, we're gonna have to play with all the big cloud players. Of course, everybody on this call, I'm sure, knows there's about 6 of them that control about 95% of the market. And we're going to have to be able to play in all of that space. I think we're also going to have a mixture of use in the public cloud where it makes sense, and then use in hybrid cloud, use in private cloud, and then sort of use in specialty cloud is kind of what I call it, which would be things like HIPAA-specific cloud or government, FISMA specific areas of the cloud that you may have to use. To the second part of your question, to me, first of all, I like to start by saying, I'm actually a huge proponent of pushing to the cloud, right? Because it gets us out of the data center business. It gets us out of some of the issues that most big corporations have with environmental currency, right? So a lot of security folks I know are not necessarily as big an advocates, but I'm a big advocate because it gets us out of having to deal with as much issues with currency. The downside, or the biggest problem, which I think is what you're poking on, Marcy, is for us has frankly been the regulatory piece, right? It's been the fact that we operate in 20 plus countries and the regulations are all over the place, and making sure that when you're shifting systems or data to the cloud, that it complies with all of those various regulatory regulations in lots of different countries is probably, and it's ever changing, is probably the most complicated piece.
So the global aspects. Absolutely, the global aspects are sort of becoming a bit of quite a challenge, I should say, where they are. Even non-global too, right? I mean, because we do business with the government, we do business with different states, even some of the states, right? California has got their privacy law, has got laws that make you really have to pay attention to that. Very awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Prentice, I'd love to hear from you. And first, I meant to say earlier, congratulations on your new position. We're excited to say congratulations to you, to everybody with you. I can't even talk today. Congratulations with everyone here with us today. I know you're new to Lincare Holdings, but we'd love to hear from you on where you are in your journey and how maybe your security team is managing and monitoring and protecting any of your company's stored files, and what are you doing for cloud storage out there, especially now we're all working remotely, but still a lot of us, we're still using cloud storage because it's just with the file sizes that are out there, the speed of information sharing, and just love to get your perspective.
Sure. And yeah, I still have the new card I can play for a while now here at Lincare.
Exactly.
So I'm still getting an understanding of where we're at. It's still pretty nascent in its move and migration to the cloud. I've had the advantage of actually working not just with Lincare in this case, but also with Royal Caribbean and then with Time Warner Cable and AOL prior. Interesting pieces. I'm kind of actually on James pocket around the cloud. If it's not your core business, I'm also a heavy proponent of moving to the cloud, because again, why are we running these sort of things and this infrastructure when that's not what we're here trying to do? If you're in a technology company, then yeah, it makes sense. If that's what your business is, but otherwise, it's the shift here. And what I've seen is, particularly with what's happened this year, as you were stating earlier, Marcy, is everybody's been driven rather unexpectedly to leveraging more cloud services and more remote access than what we had before. And it's created a challenge in file transfer. Most of us have locked down our mail system so that it's only a few meg that you can transfer through email. And if that's, there's going to be arguable about how secure that transfer method is. And then, so you've got the business leveraging whatever tools they can do, Box, Dropbox, O365. Some cases they may grab their own personal if they don't have access to a company OneDrive, or Google Docs, Google Drive, whatever they can in order for them to get the files transferred and get their business moving. So it's really, in my experience, we've in the IT realm have been playing catch up in trying to identify where the business is utilizing these technologies to do their large file transfer, and transferring some things that really need to go in a more secure method, and helping them understand, yes, we know we need to get this done. Here's a better way to do it. It's not that you can't transfer, but the way you're going is not very secure. Let's try to see if we can shift to this model. And looking at what we can do, leveraging O365. Very early on, we were leveraging, utilizing OneDrive and SharePoint OneDrive for doing some of the share methods. Be really interested in hearing what eShare has to say and what they're doing in that space to help layer on top of that. But right now, leveraging just OneDrive straight up has been where my experience has been with getting these things transferred out in a mostly secure manner.
Excellent. Nick, this is your wheelhouse. So I'm just wondering what you think about what security controls you think should be in place around cloud-based technologies to just ensure that safe usage and external file sharing. I mean, Prentice mentioned that a lot of folks are certainly making the email attachment ability much smaller, but I know that you've got a secret sauce here that can kind of wow us on how we should be doing it from a best practice perspective. Let us know.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of challenges as you're sort of embracing the cloud, which is from a security point of view, which is I think both Prentice and James sort of said that security technology in general is sort of way behind the eight ball in terms of sort of being able to rethink the whole security model of what's out there. So if you take it from a productivity point of view, right? Microsoft and Google and all these sort of productivity tools, they promise the ability to, not worry about the size of the file, not worry about what version of the file you're editing. There's just co-authoring capabilities that are there. Not worrying about, storage or anything like that. It all sort of, from a business point of view, it all sort of magically happens under the covers, right? And the business user gets the benefit, right? And you can usually achieve these benefits within corporate boundaries, right? Whatever platform you pick, it doesn't matter, right? They're pretty good. But the minute you go outside sort of those corporate boundaries, things get really hard. Because when you think about the traditional technologies we have today, like data loss prevention, how do you apply data loss prevention on a link, right? Everything that I just talked about a second ago in terms of productivity gains and enhancements are all based upon not sending a data file, but sending a link that points to some sort of cloud storage that then can be versioned, handled, and so on and so forth. But if you're sending a link, your traditional network DLP or whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter, right? None of the current sort of technology and the approaches that all large companies implement today, they simply don't work. And so in response, what we find, which is totally reasonable response is people just shut down external sharing many times because they're just not comfortable, because their controls sort of go blind. And then you have two challenges. Number one, so Prentice has the ability in his organization to share through OneDrive, but I'm going to guess if you try to share something with Cigna, that link ain't going through and it ain't getting opened up, right, in that environment. So, on the one side, there's are you okay as an organization? But on the other side, when it comes to external sharing, it's not just what you think as an organization, it's what you think and what your peer organization they're trying to work with thinks as well, right? So it's a combination of those two policies. So it gets hard, right? It gets really hard to do that in terms of what's there. And then the other part is, how do you think about, if you share a OneDrive or SharePoint, you got three options, right? You got owner, editor, and viewer, and that's it, right? Well, we all know there's typically a lot more controls that you may want to implement depending on the sensitivity of the data than just those three controls. For a myriad of reasons, it's sort of hard to do it externally. And
well,
so
from a usability standpoint, but certainly from a compliance standpoint, being in a regulated industry, you've got to really understand the whereabouts of your documentation and information sharing, because a good chunk of the time, as you know, is kind of reconstructing some of that, and if you have an audit trail, but maybe you could speak just briefly before we hit our next topic on that.
Exactly. And one of the compliance issues that cause usability issues, for example, is anonymous links. It doesn't matter who it is, but one of the first things anybody's going to do is disable anonymous links, which are immensely very usable because it's really easy for the recipient to interact, but obviously woefully inappropriate, inefficient to be sharing data anonymously for any sort of public company or any regulated company in terms of what's there. So the complexities start coming along. So eShare basically takes the approach. It says, number one, how do we basically not force a new model on top of end users? So eShare is basically like a data room that layers on top of any sort of external share and proxies essentially all the information through it. And we unify essentially the creation of that data room from any source. So it could be through email, it could be from OneDrive, it could be from Teams, it could be from anything that you want. But at the end of the day, you have a data room that's facing the outside. The only requirements of the recipient is a browser and an email address. It's completely white labeled out of the box. So it's your certificate, your URL, your brand, your logo, your everything. All right, so we're protecting your brand and it's always working. So now when you share a OneDrive to James, because it's going to be coming out of your organization, it's going to go right through the firewall, right? Because as far as Cigna is concerned, it's you that's sharing the information, not coming straight out of OneDrive, for example. And now you can get all the productivity gains, right, of being able to do co-authoring and version handling and sort of so on and so forth.
Well, thanks, Nick. You kind of a perfect segue to our next topic, which is decision to limit the role of OneDrive, SharePoint, and Online and Teams. So perfect segue for our next section. Through OneDrive and SharePoint Online and Teams, they've been included in a lot of deployments of Microsoft 365, but as we know, most organizations have really disabled some of the file sharing capabilities and even the guest access due to security concerns and privacy and confidentiality issues as well. So, but we're still storing data. And now that we're working remotely, I mean, data is like literally going everywhere and sideways and inside, outside our corporate networks. We still have to think about, regulatory types of things and just, protection of our IP and information. So we've got to really think about limiting the options for employees of moving and exfiltrating data, but it's just making it so hard for security teams right now. So I'm going to actually go to Prentice first and ask, what kind of business and security risks should one be mitigating and thinking about if they're using cloud file storage technology such as like a OneDrive or SharePoint Online, and should we kind of pick and choose the data, or what should we be doing with this cloud file storage, and what should we be thinking about right now, maybe just down the line? Because I think overall we're not going back to work in the traditional sense of how we worked in the same offices. Some of us are going back a few days a week, but still social distancing. Some of us are still 100% working remotely. So, how we're working together and collaborating is still, a little bit different for a lot of us. So, coming into your new company, how have you sort of tackled this?
Yeah, I think you hit on the really key points in this one, Marcy, and I think we've already touched on a little bit of what those challenges are. Because you're right, we're not going to get the genie back in the bottle. Even if we end up going back and everybody goes back into work, into the office, everything was over and we're all doing that. We're still going to see some of the same behaviors that we're seeing today when working remotely. Once people have access to that level of collaboration and coordination capability, they're going to want to continue utilizing it, even if they are in the same four walls in an office space. And the issue is, as Nick alluded to, it's the concern is the proliferation of the data in a way that gets beyond your control and visibility. And with the cloud, that's the biggest risk and the key one, and why a lot of security groups are locking it down 100%. Some are locking down 100%, some are locking down where it's a very small privileged few that have the capability of sharing out. I've seen both in the companies I've worked in over the last year, and that's the biggest concern is in where can you share. Some may lock where you can't share remote or outside through SharePoint, but OneDrive is allowed, but only certain people. Various things where you can do work around those kind of pieces to try to let the business move forward. Where some are laying on some form of DRM and trying to secure it that way. Not worrying so much about the file ending up somewhere where it's not supposed to be, trusting in the DRM technology to prevent someone who's unauthorized from being able to open it up. And making sure they can phone home and do all those kind of things. So I think what we're seeing is these groups are trying to figure out the best way to try to maintain some level of visibility, and they're struggling. I think that's really, in a nutshell, it's a struggle, and no one's found the perfect answer yet.
Well, Prentice, I want to kind of flip the coin over to Nick a little bit, because you kind of brought up a couple of good points yourself in that, people are trying to figure this out and then lock stuff down. People have to get their work done, so they're going to find alternate ways of doing things to get the work done. And I see a huge nod from Nick. So I'm going to ask you a question. If you disabled all this external file sharing and guest access, and lots of companies are going to have different reasons why and why not. But as we all know, there's a will, there's a way. There's truly, and we've learned a lot about wills and ways in the last few months of getting stuff to get done and still making things happen. So what do you think you could tell everybody out there what needs to happen in their companies to have these security measures in place and reverse those kinds of decisions so that we're really just not creating more problems downstream for everybody?
I think one of the key things is sort of empty your cup of tea of how you think about sort of InfoSec in the past. The controls are valid, but the way that you might implement them are different. And the cloud actually gives you some massive advantages of what you couldn't do previously. Case in point, for example, Prentice mentioned DRM, right? Traditional DRM technology was a good idea, right? The idea is you wrap the file in encryption and you don't worry about where it goes, and on access, you decide whether it should appear or not appear, so on and so forth. But that's 30-year-old technology, and it really hasn't taken off outside corporate borders, right? Where you don't control the recipient and the endpoint, so on and so forth. The idea is good, but how do we sort of transfer data and information in a way where data doesn't move? Well, if you go back to what I talked about earlier, links. When you send a link out, it doesn't matter what it is, when you send a link out pointing to the cloud and pointing to data, and you apply the appropriate controls and links, number one, when you're emailing or sending stuff around, no data is moving around, it's just a link. Secondly, there's no risk in sending a link. There's only risk on access, right? So now you think about, okay, how do I make sure that I'm controlling the access point? Then the third is, again, accessing the data in a browser doesn't provide any risk, or, well, some risk, but minimize risk, right? As opposed to downloading a file to view it on an email. So you say, well, how many things can I do within the browser context? And can I provide the whole collaboration experience without the recipient having to download the file and now have to be exposed to the endpoint? So our philosophy is, hey, the best way to protect the data is don't give it away. And unfortunately, sharing and collaboration today externally, pretty much every single time with every platform means giving the data away. SFTP, email with TLS, whatever you're doing, you're constantly going, here's all my data. I know you don't need it, but here's all my data. And what do the recipients want to do most of the time? They just want to read it, or they want to edit it, right? So if you can provide viewing and searching and editing capabilities, one, you go back to my first point, you're not providing better productivity enhancements. Two, you're providing better security, right, and usability of the system itself. Three, everybody has an email and a browser, right? The email of today is essentially the phone number, right? Not everybody has Slack, not everybody has Teams, not everybody has, right, Google Drive or whatever, but everybody has an email address. So if you make the lowest common denominator to participate, right, in a collaboration platform, an email and a browser, irrespective of device as well, browser on your phone, your tablet, your computer, now you've got a common platform with very low friction, right? You take that DRM-like capability, you put it all server-side because viewers and editors and whatever all exist server-side, and now you get better security, right? Because you're not giving away data, low friction, you're not requiring anything but an email address and a browser on the recipient, and full functionality of advanced capabilities like co-authoring and version history and so on and so forth. So you can take something that, if applied with legacy controls, is bad and hard, and if you rethink those controls, can be easier and better and more secure.
So, James, would you say, from your perspective of what Nick just proposed, would this take away some of the friction that might exist between security, IT, and privacy organizations or your teams at your company in regards to protecting the data and maintaining the confidentiality and basically just having a more cohesive virtual work environment?
Of course, absolutely is the answer. I'm sure that's the answer Nick wants to hear. Yeah, no question. I mean, today, the reality is that people do find a way to do what they need to do, and they tend to take the least path of resistance, right? So they want to do things as fast as they possibly can. And I mean, all of us have had situations with email, especially with email. I mean, the world lives in email today. And, you send files around thanks to fancy features like autofill for when you're typing names in. Pretty easily, you can accidentally send that highly confidential file to somebody you didn't intend to send it to. As has been pointed out by both Prentice and Nick, once it's out of your domain, you lose complete control of it. I mean, it's gone forever, right? So this type of solution definitely would give you a better ability to control that. It also helps with things like version control. One of the challenges we have, I would say, is, and like most big giant corporations, we have, you name the solution, we've probably got it somewhere, right? So we have a bunch of solutions, and getting to one solution that might work for multiple use cases would be definitely better. And frankly, it gets rid of some of the complexity of the environment. So yeah, I mean, having the ability to control it, not get it outside of your domain, and give people a better version control and specific rights based on their use case, definitely could be very beneficial.
So let's go ahead and transition to our next topic, James, because you've just made a perfect segue for us to go there. Let's talk a little bit more about the benefits of moving external file sharing in the cases to Microsoft 365. So a lot of us know that COVID-19 is requiring us to achieve more with less, especially in certain industries out there. And it's really pressing the importance of improving our ability to collaborate. I mean, you think about us right now, and we were sort of talking before we came on the show that, we're not traveling really anymore, but we feel like we're kind of connecting even more and working harder because we have these collaboration technologies. So, but, there's fewer systems to audit and protect. And a lot of them do have storage capabilities out there. And as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of dealing with, we still have audits and compliance issues and all this data going in and out, and you're almost having to reconstruct a lot of it. So, Nick, I'm going to kind of jump over to you for first here. And, tell us a little bit from an organizational best practice perspective, what type of new methods can we really think about to extract value from your platform solutions that are out there, such as Microsoft 365? And is anyone, are you seeing a lot of sunsetting going on, or, is there security and budget priorities shifting for the rest of the year from your perspective? And I think you bring a unique perspective to the table because you're working with a lot of different organizations out there. So you're kind of reeling that in and kind of, you know, being able to share that interesting perspective from a third-party view.
Yeah, Microsoft's done an amazing job at, quite frankly, completely dominating the enterprise space with O365, and doing a reasonable job at helping people sort of deploy the platform out there. You know, when people make, and it's a significant investment, both for the company, staffing, so on and so forth, but, you know, they have an amazing suite of tools. And in fact, even if you look at, you know, a year ago where Teams was and where Zoom was, and a year later where sort of Teams is today and Zoom is today, they've just made incredible strides in improving stuff. And you know, I always, in all the companies I've done, you always try to stay away from anywhere Microsoft's deciding to focus, because they usually will win that market. But now people are going, okay, well, how do I better leverage my investment at Microsoft? How do I eliminate all these third-party tools that now, under significant scrutiny of budget cuts, people are going, okay, you know, Smartsheets, for example, which is a great platform. It's Excel on steroids. If you're not aware of it, it has sort of collaboration capabilities. A lot of business people like it, but it's $450 or something like that per user per year. They're looking at things like Box, right, in a compliance mode, which is something like $400 per user per year. And they're going, wait a minute, I'm already paying for E3 or E5, you know, whatever I'm paying for. I already have unlimited storage. I already have SharePoint. I have this Microsoft suite. Why am I paying as much or more than I'm paying for the Microsoft platform for something else? Now, from a security point of view, it's another headache that the CISOs have to deal with and manage and worry about and configure, and sort of so on and so forth. So we're finding consolidation, people saying, okay, how do I, you know, have my focus be O365, and how do I find add-on tools to fill some of the gaps that O365 has to provide sort of an enhanced interface or sort of the, in our case, external sharing capabilities, where I'm not duplicating the data, I'm not replicating information, I'm not worrying about data spillage into other environments, so that the investment that I've made in containing and protecting and monitoring and so on and so forth on my O365 platform is leveraged, where you get a 1 + 1 = 3 type value. And the pandemic situation and difficulties, if anything, have really accelerated those. You know, when you're making money like crazy, and the business person says, hey, you know what, I really like this platform. Yeah, it's a lot of money, but who cares? We're making money. IT will usually go, okay, under these circumstances, but it's kind of like, well, do you really like the product enough to have to lay off one more person? It's a different discussion. And so we're seeing, you know, and I think this is, again, to the advantage, the smart IT folks, and especially the security folks, are leveraging this to consolidate the tool base to fewer tools that they can have better visibility and control over, and at the same time, save quite a bit of money.
So, you know, I'd love to get James' thoughts here from a CISO standpoint on if there's what benefits you're thinking about with fewer systems, having that sharing and handling of your company's data, and would your security team, you know, be more streamlined in terms of focusing on other things so they're not having to chase a lot of this down?
It would definitely potentially would help us with creating capability that we could go focus on other things. I think the next point, particularly in the scenario we're in now with the pandemic, everyone is squeezed, right, for budget and squeezed to get more done with less. And this type of thing can definitely make a difference there. I know for our team, as my team would tell you, they are painfully aware. One of my major of the 5 big goals I've got this year, one of my major ones is to reduce the number of products, reduce the number of partners, and streamline so that we're getting better utilized, more interoperable tools. Because today, like a lot of big firms, name the tool, we've probably got it somewhere, and there's a lot of hidden costs in managing all of those tools. So we literally are embarking as we speak this year on a pretty heavy strategy to reduce that and get to fewer partners, fewer tools, better utilized, better integrated among the tools that we keep. So this certainly could be a good way to reduce that.
So Prentice, from your perspective as well, do you agree with James on this?
Oh, wholeheartedly. James is just preaching to the choir on that one. That's something I've pushed for a long time. The more tools we have, this is not just a security thing. This is a general IT principle. Is you got a lot of different tools, then you've got administrative overhead that you don't even necessarily recognize because it's not hitting a dollar on the financial account per se. It's lost in hours of time, and tracking those hours is really hard to do, and loss of productivity. And that's something that we have to pay attention to. Nick nailed it earlier is when he said people users are going to find the path of least resistance. Well, by its very nature, security tends to introduce some level of friction. And admittedly, when we first this industry started or profession really started picking up, we introduced a lot of friction. And we've slowly, as the profession has matured, we're learning, hey, you know what? We really shouldn't be introducing all this friction. And in fact, we want to, the goal that we should be looking at, and that I have my team challenged with, is look for ways that we are integrating our controls and our activities into what the people are doing. It's got to be part of their day-to-day. And with that, what technologies we're using, pinning it down to just a few, because if we have a lot of options, then you're also going to have people utilizing, you're going to have some people over here using this one, some people over there using that one, and being able to maintain that holistic view is going to also be a challenge. So it's a combination of not so much reducing choices because you want them to have fewer choices, but reducing the choices so that you have a standard way of accomplishing things. And so that you're able to see and pay attention, you have a better view of what's going on, which means that you can identify anomalies easier, that you can see that anomalous behavior, that it's a clear and defined process and procedures so people know what is expected, which means that they are going to be more in line to do it because there's not a lot of ambiguity. And if people don't know, they're going to go find their own solution.
Thanks, Prentice. I think we have some time for some questions from our audience today, and it sounds like our panelists are pretty much in consensus here, overall. But I think we sparked some interest from our audience here. Our first question is from Jeffrey Saxton, and his question is about issues with accessing files and such in China. We currently have on and off issues with our China office getting shared files. That's a great question. Nick, do you want to tackle that one? Because it seems like a product functionality question.
Yeah, it's one of the big challenges that people don't realize, that pretty much any cloud provider of any service that's not based out of China is blocked by the Great Firewall. So, and people don't even realize that. Many times multinational subsidiaries may have a facility in China and their US O365 tenant works fine because they have an MPLS connection or something between the two, so the traffic's routing back to the US, but then they share something to somebody outside that environment, a peer or another organization in China. It doesn't work, right? Why? Because it doesn't work over the public internet. And so that's another one of the reasons why people use our platform beyond, for example, as we talked about leveraging us at Prentice's company to send something to Cigna that blocks all cloud providers because it's their brand and their URL and their certificate. It works the same way in China. One of our very common use cases is leveraging us to be able to send or receive information from China or any of the sort of problematic countries around the world that sort of do a lot of blocking and monitoring, because that again goes under our client's certificate, under their URL, and the data is sitting in OneDrive or SharePoint or Office Online or whatever. It all works perfectly fine because again, it's under the guise essentially of the customer certificate and URL. So all that works seamlessly all around the globe, whether it's sending something to an insurance company, to a bank, to China, to whatever the case may be, by basically presenting this white labeled solution under the client's brand and certificate presence, it goes anywhere. And if it doesn't, then our customer has bigger issues to worry about if their base domains get blocked.
Well, excellent. Thanks for answering that question, Nick. We've got two questions that are fairly related from Sujit Babale. First, it says, good afternoon, Nick. So this is another question for you. Do you offer time-based, person-based dynamic watermarking? And is there a way to insert a marker in documents so that their sprawl can be traced during the external collaboration? That's another great question.
Yeah, it is. So the answer is yes. You know, half of the battle is don't give away the data. The other half of the battle that we recommend is don't let it be available forever. So all of our shares can be based with automatic expirations, which is not a unique feature within itself. However, it's not used many times. And a lot of times in security, the issue is not that there's a control, but it's a control that has too much business impact. So we provide that with the ability for the recipient, when and if it expires, to request an extension and handle that whole workflow. So it's a very easy thing for business people to accept and many times because it's not a permanent expiration. Second, we have very, very granular tracing controls. We can tell you essentially whether the email was sent, whether the recipient organization mail system got it, whether the end user actually read it, whether they opened up the document. Recently, we added a new piece of functionality. We can tell you what page of the PDF file the user was using and how long they spent on which page of the PDF file. So we give you some very, very detailed forensic information about exactly what the end user is doing. And again, this has business value. This was implemented for a financial institution customer that cared about their performance reports. They spend a lot of money putting these performance reports together, send them to their investment, and they really want to understand where their investors are spending time to spend more time on those parts of the report and eliminate other parts. So it's not just a security aspect of it. A lot of the stuff that we're doing for security also has a great business benefit as well.
Thank you very much, Nick. Our next question is from James Robertson. How do you feel questions about controls for identity proofing for entities that you may not deal with directly in MFA requirements, and if you're using the external link process for that type of sharing? Anyone want to tackle that question?
I mean, our point of view is that, you know, the key to security, especially around links, is identity management is one of the key components of that. And the old technique of basically forcing the recipient of the share back into your ecosystem is something that's simply not necessary anymore, and our point of view should be avoided, because people don't want one more username and password to remember. And secondly, oversharing is going to become a big issue very quickly, because as you're creating all these shares and all these links, how do you make sure that they expire? How do you make sure that when that employee leaves the organization, they no longer have access to that information? Well, if you're forcing them into your ecosystem, they're going to have no idea that they left the company, and they're going to continue to be able to access the data. So there are technologies like OpenID, for example, that we leverage in a different way than most. You've all seen it. You know, when you see the login with Google, the login with Facebook, that's an OpenID technology used usually for registration. We use it as an identity access management component, so that when you say share with this person and require a login, we make them log into their G Suite account or their Google account or their Outlook account or L365 account. And we can do that without having a relationship with that particular institution, just working off of the OpenID standard that's out there today. So it gives you both an easier user experience, because it's not one more username and password to remember. If they're already in a browser accessing their email, they're already logged in, so they won't even have to enter a password. And it's more secure, because when that user gets terminated from that organization, if it's a business account, they immediately lose access to all the data. And I think that's the key to all of this, and both Prentice and James said it. We, you know, vendors like us need to take the attitude that we need to make it secure, but number one, we have to make it easier. And if we're not making it easier, you're not going to get adoption. If you don't get adoption, it's a waste of money. And that's been sort of a focus that we've had, is how do we take good controls, see what their limitations are that are impacting the business, and implement them in such a way where the users will like them and embrace them.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah,
oh, go ahead, James.
Just to add, I was just going to add to, you know, it's another one of those, you know, that can be a really large cost, hidden cost of administration at the end of the day. I mean, that's the deal. Otherwise, I agree with me.
Our next question is from Richard Levine. When James Prentice streamlined their tools to save money and make the data of their companies more secure, what is the technology criteria that they use to decide which tools to get rid of? That's a long conversation for a couple minutes left in our show today.
Let me give a shot real quick. I can probably sum it up a little bit. It's actually, when I'm looking at that and having the team look at it, it's less about the technology in a lot of cases. Well, I mean, if the technology doesn't fit, then we drop it automatically. But it's really about how well does it fit with what we already have. So I take a critical mass approach. how much of that vendor do we already have in the environment? How well does it integrate together? If that vendor has reached critical mass, then that's a heavy weight towards streamlining that vendor. James, do you have a different approach?
No, I mean, a similar approach. The one thing I would add, and I've said this to my team more than once, is, here's part of the problem is we'll have two tools, and I'm making this up, but, one tool will have 95% of the capability of the other tool, but boy, we need that other tool because we get that 5% extra. But what you find when you dig under the covers is if you're not careful, you're, as I like to put it, you're paying $10 to protect a $5 piece of data. Right, I mean, that's what we run into, right, because of all the extra costs. And I think we don't necessarily do a good job of really understanding the total cost of ownership of these tools or of the service that you're putting out there. So that's a way we're looking at it for sure.
Agreed.
Our last question is from James Lynn, and the question is, China now is blocking ESNI enabled TLS 1.3 connections. How do you handle that? Is that a quick answer, Nick, or maybe you guys should have an offline conversation?
You got to stick with 1.2 for now. You just can't.
There's not enough adoption of 1.3 just yet for us to be able to turn that off or restrict to 1.3 in any of the companies I've dealt with recently. I don't know. It's not quite there yet.
It's because of the lack of adoption, I think, in China making that statement. It's going to increase the difficulty of the adoption of 1.3, and it may fix itself by simply people never getting critical mass due to adoption reasons. So.
True.
Well, I want to say thank you guys for all coming today and sharing your awesome thoughts. I think we had a wonderful conversation. I want to remind everybody to go ahead and take the survey and tell us your thoughts about today, and we appreciate you coming as well. And if you need that CPE credit, do let us know your CPE number so that we can share the information and make that deposit happen for you. Couple of save the dates. We've got a busy week coming up still. We have our ISE West Executive Foreman Awards on August 20th, so I hope you'll join us. We'll be also celebrating the ISE Central region on September 2nd with our ISE Central Executive Foreman Awards. We also have our ISE North America Awards due on September 25th, and that is with our healthcare, financial services, public sector, academia, and commercial categories for both executives and projects. And then we'll have our ISE Northeast Executive Foreman Awards on October 6th. And then our ISE North America Leadership Summit Awards, November 12th and 13th. As we've mentioned previously, all of our programs for the remainder of the year will be on in a digital format. We appreciate all of you joining us today. Many, many thanks to eShare for being our sponsor. We really enjoy our partnership with you. Prentice and James and Nick, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. I really enjoyed our conversation. And everyone on our session today, thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time, and stay healthy and safe.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marcy.
Thank you.